Welcome to Switching On Electrified Skills, the podcast that sparks your curiosity and ignites your passion for a career in electrification. I'm Deepak Farmer. Join me on this electrifying adventure where I connect you with industry leaders, visionary education providers, and pioneers driving the electric revolution. Discover the world of skills, jobs, and community, gaining actionable insights, inspiring stories, and the latest developments.
Welcome to another episode of Switching On Electrified Skills. This is an exciting episode for me because we're bringing two important parts of what I believe are very big opportunities to the table. So we've got sustainability that we're bringing to the forefront, and we're also bringing in new entrants into new ecosystems and new business propositions. So I've got two amazing guests today from GreenTech Industries, and they're going to be talking to us about the new opportunities that they're creating within the sustainability space. I'll ask them to introduce themselves. So if we start with Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Booth. Nice to meet you. I'm the CEO of GreenTech.
Morning, everybody. I'm Will Grocott. I'm Chief Program Officer for GreenTech Industries.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got lots of different things to talk about today, right? And I really want to dig into some of the areas around the business opportunities that you've created and some of the sustainability. But before we do that, right, I'd like my guests to know a little bit more about yourselves, because your journeys have been fascinating themselves. So if we start with yourself, Tony, you want to tell us a little bit about how you've ended up here, and a little bit more about where you started from and that journey in between.
Yes, quite a long story. You sure you want to go through the journey with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's where to start from, really. It's probably the most inspirational point. So I'm a kid from Coventry. Anybody could be where I am now with a little bit of determination. I grew up in a council estate with a one-parent family and was able to take my ambition and desire not to be there for my family to drive myself into positions of companies where I've been a director now for 15 years of some major corporates around the world. Just to name a couple like Johnson Matthey and Williams Grand Prix. And in any role that I ever had, I always tried to do something where I felt like I had a purpose. And by holding on to that, wanting to have a purpose, I got noticed. And so I always drove not just the job that I was being offered, I always looked at areas within the business where they could improve.
That's amazing. And, as part of that, you said, it's almost like saying I've got the whole idea of having a purpose. Some of our audiences out there, will be looking for their next step and their next purpose. How do you understand that, yourself? How do you make sense of your own purpose there?
So I think actually it was probably Williams Advanced Engineering that got my mind set into this space, because we were always looking for industrial and economical challenges to be able to make sure that what we were creating and what we were developing from an innovation point of view had a purpose to solve. So that problem solving piece was the bit that got me into looking at actually where's the next piece for me and people that want to be a part of what we do next will feel like that they're actually going to work and there's a mission attached to it, because that economical and industrial challenge piece is how I found what the purpose was for GreenTech Industries.
Excellent. And, we're going to talk about that in more detail shortly. And Will, yourself?
Well, I think for me, it was rooted in people. My background, my dad was trained as a horticulturalist, a gardener. I worked for the council. My mum was a typist for Lloyd's Bank. We used to live in a cemetery lodge. So we came from very humble beginnings, much like Tony, where we valued the things that we had around us, and we kept the things that we had around us for as long as we could, because we just couldn't keep affording to buy new things, right? So there was always this element of use and reuse that was featured throughout my whole career. But I remember going on family holidays with me and my two sisters, and my dad used to take us out for a walk, and we could never keep up with him. It was just like purgatory. We just wanted this to stop, right? And then he would stop and he would find something. He'd like lift a stone up and there'd be a thing underneath it. He'd be talking about this thing that he'd found, or a leaf on a tree, and about the tree. And we were like, me and my sister would look at each other and think, when is this going to be over? But I realised much later in life that this was just a metaphor for my life. I realised that actually all I'd done in my career was blast through my career and seen nothing. It's only when you force yourself to stop and look at things and look at things in a different way do you actually start to understand the world around you and start piecing it together. And that was a real shift for me. There was some really interesting commentary that I got back from people that were around me at the time and the way that I was thinking about things. And my daughter, bless her, who came back from the Navy, she's been in the Navy now for 8 years, went out for a run with me. And she said, you know what, I'm not too sure whether the NHS is going to work when I grow up. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to be able to afford a mortgage. I'm not too sure whether trains will run on time. I'm not too sure whether we'll be able to buy fresh food in the supermarket. We might just have to put meals in the microwave. And she went on and on and on. And I thought, as a dad, as like all dads do, I can fix this, right? And I thought, I can't fix any of this. And I said to her, I can't fix any of this. And she said, I know you can't fix any of it. And I kind of thought, well, that's a relief. But then she said something that was quite profound. She said, all I want to know is that you're trying. And then I thought, what do I do? I have a conscious decision to make. I can choose to turn up to work tomorrow and choose to do something different to what I'm doing today to try and make a difference. And that's a choice we all have.
That's quite interesting because in that sort of journey that you just articulated, you know, we've talked about your parents and also the next generation, right? And it is such a wide breadth of, you could say responsibility, right, that you've taken on there in terms of moving things forward, but also then setting up for the next generation. Both of you, even yourself, you talked about your mum being single parent and all that. Yeah. How did that influence you in terms of your next steps?
I think, starting at a position where actually you don't have a lot makes you realise that actually going to work isn't about money. And having many young jobs like we all do when we start out in our careers, the collecting glasses and washing pots and working in markets and those sort of jobs where actually you realise you're having such a great time with a team helps you drive the decision on where you go to next. Those fundamental first steps are what drive you in the way you are and the way that you act when you're at work. There's a structure that you get to push yourself through from a worker. I suppose it's a work ethic aspect, and getting that work ethic piece in was driven from my mum. So she worked 2 jobs to keep us going. She was hardly at home because of that. We had to maintain the house because she would be mad if she come home and it was a mess. And that kind of work ethic got ground into me from that process. And, I couldn't thank her enough for that. Right now, like what Will said, we've been through some serious careers with some really good companies that helped us and allowed us to go on some really good projects and work with some really good brands. But through all of that, we've made decisions along the way, which we're now trying to fix today. The whole purpose of GreenTech Industries is to create a company that's overcoming stuff that we actually had a chance of fixing a long time ago, but because we were with companies that want to focus on meeting performance, looking at the new invention, solving the problems that met their company's goals, and what we're now doing is trying to make sure that we close that circle with GreenTech Industries.
That's really interesting because you've got a lot of people in our listeners, for example, who'll be working in various different businesses as well. And you mentioned that the drivers of a business, right, and how that was different when you were working at various different companies. And how has that changed? How's that landscape looking like now? Because I would imagine that with everybody now being focused on many being focused on being driven towards sustainability, how would those companies, how have they adjusted? And maybe what message would you give to businesses that are still trying to understand their place in that new ecosystem?
Yeah, I think we were lucky, weren't we, with working at Johnson Matthey. It was a phenomenal company to work for. They had this ethic around ESG, which is sustainability goals for you at a corporate level and how to measure them. That actually opened my eyes to a company that was trying to do everything it could. Predominantly a mining company, but actually deploying the materials that they get out of the mines into trying to solve climate problems, through functional materials. And because of that ethos, they had this really structured and well believed in and driven from management and across the business ethos around sustainability. And actually, that helped me get a bit of focus on that you can make profit and you can still be a very good company where people want to go to work and be mixed into one. It's not a bad thing, profit. But as long as you're deploying that back into innovation, that's solving climate problems, you've then got a solution where people want to come and work for you. You know, they had an amazing hit rate on how long people stayed there. You know, there are people that had worked there for 40 plus years, you know, that never left. And the reason for that is because they had this mission and goal that people believed in and they wanted to go and help and feel like they were doing something that mattered. And we've just tried to follow that same principle into GreenTech Industries. We've got some real industry challenges that we're trying to solve. We're taking materials out of other materials. We could call that urban mining today, you know, and we're taking those new materials and we're reprocessing them and putting them where they're needed most. You know, so we're following the similar principles that we've been taught from when we were working at Johnson Matthey, really. But then taking that, I suppose, my learning from Williams Grand Prix and all the motorsport work that I did, that technology transfer. So the way you keep a motorsport company alive is by deploying your technology that you develop into different sectors. So researching the technology that you're creating in those motorsport, let's call them hot environments where you've got a lot of pressure to be able to achieve and deliver, and you know, you can't miss a race. Take that pressure pot, take the technology that's been created in it and then certify it and then transfer it into other things. So we're just taking those two models, crashing them together, but focusing on full ESG requirements. So to answer your question on sustainability goals for companies, I have a bit of a strict feeling around this, which, you know, a lot of companies probably wouldn't agree to. But I think if you're making profit, you should be deploying it into solving problems. You know, there isn't a reason for you not to be doing that. There are global problems that are driven by industry that actually are probably because of the company that you run, that you should be deploying some of your profit into fixing. And that's what we're doing at GreenTech Industries. It's exactly what we're doing.
That's really interesting. And with regards to the, you know, the journey that you've had up until now, and we'll come to how you guys came together in a minute. But Will, from yourself, how have you seen the word sustainability change, right, in its meaning, right, over your career?
Well, I think that's quite interesting. I mean, part of me coming back into Civvy Street from being in the army, I did a university degree. I didn't have many qualifications when I left school, and education came to me a lot later on in life. And I actually think for me that was a good thing, because I learnt an awful lot before I got to the point of me starting to study. So I'd seen a lot, I'd travelled, I'd met different people, different backgrounds and experiences, which gave me a different view maybe on life to maybe a student that maybe had not seen that and gone into education for the first time. So I think that was an advantage for me. But I remember reading a book called The Estate We're In by Nicola Baird, and that was part of our coursework, which was all about the impact of the car on society. And I thought then, well, this is incredible. This was something that was not really talked about. And dare I say it, it's only just starting to be talked about now, right? And that's 25 years on. And we need to start thinking about what does sustainability mean, to your question. And I think it's different things to different people. Okay. But I do think if we're not careful, it becomes too big and people can't feel like they can interface with it or do something with it.
Everyone needs to understand it, don't they?
Right, and it means something different to different people. But in some small way, if it means something to you that is personal that you can get behind, then go out and do it. We all want the same thing. We all aspire for our kids to have the things that they want, and we want for a safer place and a cleaner environment. And why can't we just do our bit to try and do that? There's so much value in some of the things that are out in the workplace at the minute and in product at the minute that we can take and repurpose and reconnect with other industries or back into the same industries, and not see this stuff being incinerated or not see this stuff going into the ground or leaching into watercourses. You know, we can do something if we choose about this.
I think also all the problems aren't known, are they? I mean, we know them because we research.
We know some of them.
The ones we want to focus on, we know, but actually, even some of them, they're not commonly known, but they should be. When you look at an electric car and versus an ICE vehicle today, an ICE vehicle, which is an internal combustion engine vehicle, today, that vehicle is pretty much 90% plus recyclable and actually repairable, and in a lot of instances reusable. And there is a whole network of companies and skilled people that break down those cars into individual components and find a way of maximizing the value of those components before it ends up going through a shredder and being incinerated and turned back into a raw material. In electric vehicles, that doesn't exist. So today, right now, we go out and buy an electric car because we've got one mindset of wanting to do the right thing for global warming and carbon capture and not putting emittents out into the world. But actually, there's a it's not a hidden truth. There's a piece of engineering that still needs to be worked out, that over the 150 years of an internal combustion engine car had been. And if we don't, there is more than 1 million jobs UK alone that will not have jobs to go to in service and aftermarket. So there's a lot of reasons for why we're doing what we're doing, and that sustainability piece is not just about trying to recycle correctly, because I think that's where it all began. It's like, we've got to make sure we recycle correctly. I know, as a company, let's put the right bins in the right places, and that's it. We've ticked we've got an environmental strategy. Let's make sure that we separate our metals. No, it's actually about value retention. We've got to make sure that we're not putting too much through these waste streams that don't need to go there yet.
We talked about recycling a few times.
Yeah.
Now, when I was growing up, we had variation of different views, right, on whether recycling was even necessary. It became a quick thing, just either stick it in the bin and, it'll be sorted and, whatever. Now I get beaten by my wife all the time about which bin I'm putting things in. But that's one end of it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that is still small pockets of actions that people are taking now. And for most in their, world, that's enough. They feel that they're doing enough, right? But what's the realist viewpoint on that, right? You come at it from a much more wider, more impactful, we're talking about industrial change sort of perspective, which is on the other side of that scale, right? What is your real perspective on what people should be doing and how you can influence, right, to make a much bigger impact than simply just being satisfied that you're contributing?
Well, I think, again, it boils down to what can you do? There's plenty of people that will tell you what you should be doing. But at the end of the day, it's about what does that contribution mean to you, and the conscious decision that you're going to make to do something different. You talk about the bins, right? You don't have to do that. You could choose to do something else. We have people outside of the county that will come into this county and fly tip and think that's okay, because they're getting rid of their waste as far as they're concerned. All they're doing is shifting the waste to a different point for it to be picked up and collected by others. We have people, dare I say it, in supply chains that are doing something very similar. We've seen in the automotive industry things like EVs. We talked about car ownership. Well, we don't own cars anymore. We have them on PCP agreements for 3 years and we give them back. Now, the interesting thing with that is that when that was not the case, we actually had a vehicle that we had to do something with at its end of its life. We had to either take it to a scrappy or a dismantler, or we had to sell it, or whatever it was. We don't have any of that now. We drive it till a lamp comes on and we give the car back. Now, that's not to say the problem's gone away. It's just that we don't have the problem anymore. It's gone to somebody else. And they're seeing this problem on a huge scale, because the amount of vehicles that are being sold, okay, arguably, it's less than what they was in 2017 by almost a factor of 50%. Car sales are falling. But the content of EVs is continuing to grow. And the ZEV mandates and everything else that we're starting to see, and also the brakes that we're seeing and encouragement that's being put behind the grants for electric vehicles from government, are going to make sure that content of EVs continues to rise and grow. And we have to start making choices and decisions around where this material goes and what we do with it. Even if we talk about, well, okay, we've got a solution which is to take cells out of vehicles and we're going to refine them and turn them into black mass. Fine, that I have no problem with that. But for every 1 ton of black mass you create, you've got to put 2 tons in. So there's still 1 ton of waste going somewhere, which is a toxic soup of all sorts. So, and before we even get there, there's so much value that we can do and think of in terms of retaining, repurposing, and doing something with that. I don't think we've really started to unpick, and I think that is the exciting area. We talk about green and green technology, and you see people from an environmental standpoint. They're some of the most passionate people you'll ever meet, right? Now you then weld that together with engineers who are passionate about innovation, and suddenly you've got quite a dynamic environment where you've got these two forces coming together: innovators, engineers, bright minds, driven by an environmental purpose. Why would you not want to work in that space?
Yeah, we were looking at some stats yesterday because we were fortunate enough to attend an SMMT event. And so this data is as of yesterday. So 2018 is what everybody uses for their current core data of vehicle registration and scrappage numbers, because that was before COVID. Well, this year we're back to the 2018 numbers, which is 1.6 million cars registered every year in the UK. That's brand new cars registered every year. So every 3 years, somebody lets go of a car because of the PCP, HP style financing models that we've got. And that goes into the dealership, and that goes into the aftermarket for resale for second-hand cars. Well, in the EV space, the car value plummets that much that the actual business case doesn't make sense right now. They sell them at a number, it plummets that fast because there's no parts to maintain it or service it. So exactly what Will's saying, we've got to try. There is an absolute place for us maximising the opportunity of being able to get to black mass. Absolutely, there is. Shredding and grinding and going down that process is absolutely the way to go. But actually, we should be what we would call scrimp our way through that. We shouldn't be allowing ourselves to put 2 ton in to get to 1 ton. We should be putting in 1.1 ton. And we should be getting a ton out, and that we should be targeting getting to a much better yield over that process. And the way to do that is by stop putting so much stuff in there that doesn't need to be in there. So by being able to have a process where you can actually retain the value of parts before it gets to that position, and making sure that only parts that are meant to be going through that process go through it, the yield will be better. So all of a sudden it unlocks the ability to be able to manage those 1.6 million cars when they get to the end of their life. Because at the moment, the capacity for shredding and grinding in the UK isn't enough to meet what we believe the 2030 numbers to be for end of life. So all of a sudden, we've got an absolute need for a company like GreenTech to be there, to take all those principles and morals, find innovations to be able to reuse the material and actually drive forward with an agenda that creates green parts. The green part agenda is actually something that's been driven by Scandinavia and actually then fed into Germany. And they've got 2 legislations in Europe. One's called, it's about reusing waste materials in new products. And there's a percentage that you have to put into that process. So they've got a legislation for that. They've also got a legislation for something called the right to repair. Now, that one for me is exactly where GTI is, GreenTech Industries. We're in this right to repair strategy. So, I've got a really old Volkswagen Beetle in my garage at home, 1971. I've had it for years. I can go this weekend if I want to, take that engine apart. I can weld under the car. I can go and buy all the bits. I can rebuild that engine and off I go again. I can remake that car as many times as I want because parts are available. We can't do that with EVs. The confidence isn't there, the knowledge isn't there, and the parts aren't there. We have to fix those 3 things, and that will happen because it had to happen for people to be able to be confident in their garage to weld under their car next to a fuel tank. It's just as dangerous as working on a battery, but people are confident to do it. So eventually that knowledge and that confidence will happen. But if parts aren't available, no one can do anything. So we have to be able to provide the ability for people to be able to buy parts that they're confident that are going to do the job, not from a scrapyard, whether you get no liability or no warranty with the part, from a business to business proposal that allows you to buy parts with confidence.
I think the other thing just building on that, which I think is really important, is not just the knowledge to do it and not just the parts to do it, but you've got to know why you're doing it. And if you understand why you'd want to do that as opposed to just buying something new, well, then there'll be a market that needs to serve you, and that's the market that we want to create. And I think that is a shift that we need to make, a societal shift that we need to make, because it bleeds into everything. It bleeds into textiles, clothes. It's everywhere. It's this whole proliferation of I can get it and I can get it tomorrow. So why would I want to even think about repairing something? We talked about the other day about you can buy a new lawnmower with a battery in it cheaper than you can buy a new battery for your lawnmower. Yeah. Where do we stop with this? Where does the market change? Where do we actually stop and go, you know what, this actually isn't right? You know, we're trying to do something with motive power, with spillover projects and spillover products out of an automotive space to support people in mobility scooters who pay an astronomical amount of money for batteries to power mobility.
Yeah, where the quality of them, by the way, is, you know, actually suspect of being something that shouldn't be in the market anyway. You know, these fires that are happening at homes from people who have got an e-bike battery and they plug it in at home, those batteries haven't been validated through vibration profile and thermal profiles. You know, these are just built and sold. So when somebody hits a curb, a buzz bar comes off, they go home, plug it in, they're going to get arcing. And that causes a fire. And, you know, we're allowing these products to get into industry. With us doing what we're doing with automotive, we get access to a load of components that are good. We test them, we validate them to make sure that they're good, but they are at a level of quality that is much more superior than what's on the market in those other applications. So we can now feed in at a very low cost into market areas that couldn't afford it originally. Which is a major move, really. So we're doing that in mobility, for mobility scooters and wheelchairs. We're doing it in construction, generator products, in home energy storage products, because all of those components that are in those applications today are questionably safe.
And we want to target and pitch it for people that need it. You know, people that need mobility scooters don't need to be paying hundreds of pounds for a battery. They're people arguably that can't afford hundreds of pounds for a battery. But what the mobility scooter gives them is something of a quality of life that they don't get if they don't have it. So why are we just saying, you know, with all this material that's around us that's got value, that we can't repurpose it and put it into these applications? We actually absolutely can. Yeah. But it's a conscious decision and it's a choice that we choose to make. And as GreenTech, it's something that we're proud and want to get behind because we think we can make a difference.
It's funny, we run, I know we're way off piste here, but we'll carry on, shall we? So we run a innovation workshop every month in the business, and the team love it because they're allowed to go away and come up with ideas where it's a buy and sell idea that's just not in our market today, but they've seen it somewhere else, where they can recreate a brand new product out of the materials that they know that we're saving. And the ideas we've had are all over the shop, aren't they? It's brilliant. Yeah. So one of the ideas has actually now been put into a project which has got nothing to do with automotive or batteries, actually, which is actually our core as a business. It's a project called Be Loud. And it's funny because we're sat in a studio today with a similar product pinned to the walls. It's taking a waste stream of clothes from the textiles industry and turning them into sound deadening material boards. And actually, the intention is to be able to put them into shapes that have been agreed with automotive. So if you think about a car door, being able to put sound deadening material into that car door shape, so we'll press that material into the shape that they need. And we're running a trial program now on that. So as much as we're EVs, batteries, motors, magnets, that was the first place for us to start because it's kind of where we're most comfortable and our network is to be able to make sure that we've got a business that's successful. But it's not the only place we're going to be. We're actually trying to solve a lot of industry problems and a lot of problems that are just leaching into the earth. And it's really about that. It's about making sure that from an engineering point of view, we can deliver an answer to problems that we've got today.
Yeah. I think there's so much to go at there, right? And so exciting because, you know, there's a ecosystem growing here that I think is become, and you're a great example of it, right? In terms of, building a business proposition, right, that sits within on the right side of sustainability
Mm.
and really making a difference. But you mentioned a couple of things, right? One I wanted to pick up on was you said you were fortunate enough to be brought to go to SMMT, which is a quite humble thing to say.
Mm.
Whereas I feel that you should be part of a lot more conversations. How are you finding your business and you, as in where you come from, and that whole idea of supporting the sustainability in industry? How are you finding being invited to conversations, being part of that ecosystem? Because it is going to come. There's a lot of influential players out there, as you know, right? Regulations.
Yeah.
How are you taking a role in that?
Well, I I have to curb my frustrations with this, right? So we have the model in my head is very simple. We have a product, we have a market, and we have legislation. If you have a foot in two of those spaces, you can influence the other. So if you have a product and you have legislation, you can drive a market. If you have a market and you have a product, you can drive legislation. And if you have a market and you have legislation, you can drive a product. But you have to be in two of those places. Where we're at the minute is legislation is rightly there to police and conform, but it's slow. And it causes a real problem for us as an organisation when you start to think about getting permits and all of those things. They can take 9 to 12 months to be able to get to a point where you can even operate. The market at the moment is still very much around let's make things. GDP and the whole push to become a more value based nation is all about what we produce. We want to actually use those same methods of manufacture, but in disassembly. I mean, we're engaging with innovators and people within this space, and they say, you know what, the innovation and the real interest and novel thing for us is that we're going to use robots and lasers and sensors and all these other things, not in the manufacture and making of these things, but actually to take these things apart. And for them, that's something they've not really considered before. And you think, what have we been doing all these years?
Yeah.
Now, to talk about the voice, our voice is tiny. In the environment that we're in, we were speaking to some guys yesterday who have got 60 sites across the UK. They're probably the third biggest authorised treatment facility and provider. And they're saying their voice is tiny when it comes to actually being able to drive the things that they're seeing in the market, the things that they're seeing in the product, let alone legislation.
Mm.
So GTI, we're realists. We realise that we are not going to change the world. It's not going to stop us from trying to make a difference. And the only way that we can do that is not by necessarily being front and centre and trying to change legislation. We're going to need to do that with others.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier about how me and Will come together, and how we met each other and how we ended up working together on GreenTech Industries, because Will's on a journey with me doing this, and he could be doing something completely different at a very senior level in corporates. He's been about, so he's a really heavy hitter, and he's chosen to actually get on this mission and to do something that has got a purpose, and where he feels comfortable, where he can come along this journey with us, and where we met feeds into why probably we are having a bit of a different response to maybe some of the SMEs or startups in the space of having a voice. So we ran a project back in 2012, maybe 2011 actually, where there wasn't a Innovate UK then. There wasn't an APC. There was there was a TSB, a Technology Strategy Board, and we had a project with our boss Don Newton, and we led a project where we put the first SAL prototype production line into WMG, Warwick Manufacturing Group. That was the first time the UK had ever produced a SAL, a battery cell. And through that program, they realised that actually there was a development path that needed to happen in battery technology across the UK. And it wasn't just us, because there was a massive team. We were just a couple of couple of pegs in that wheel. And there was a big number of us that helped make this happen. But we were helped influence the original swim lanes that entered into the Innovate UK process of what we needed to develop, and help create that Innovate landscape as a what are the developing steps that need to happen. Because of that, we've got really good contacts and networks inside APC and Innovate UK and across the industry, because of those projects that we did and that we were lucky to be a part of back at that time. So it's hard for me to say, you know, I don't see the voice we have as a negative. I see that actually we're only just revenue based. We've only been operational for half a year. We've been building this strategy since 2017 and doing loads of research and collecting a network of companies, because we've been able to do this along the side of doing other work. Because of that, we've been able to get this momentum where actually we do have a voice. We are getting into the SMMT events. We are being allowed to be members of certain associations, and we are able to go into big OEMs and talk to them about their problems because of the network we've got. And I don't think that's right for all SMEs and startups. I think actually, if it wasn't for that history and that network, I think it would be really difficult for companies to be able to get heard.
I think there's also a something about mindset, right? And you are either people that like procedure, that you like what to understand what's coming next. You know, you like structure, or you pretty much throw it to one side and you're excited by the unknown, because you can jump into it and you can shape it and you can drive it and you can make it what you want it to be. And this is where Tony and I and others of GreenTech have decided that's where we're going to play. We're going to jump into something that is something that we can form and we can develop and we can grow. And that, if you've got that mindset, then it is a fun place to be. If you haven't got that mindset, it's terrifying. And
it's a fine line between the
horses
two,
for
right?
courses.
Because not everybody can take that risk. But however, it is the most exciting place. I love that sort of space, you know, where the unknown can take you.
Yeah.
And I guess that then brings me quite nicely onto the question on people and skills, right? Now, we have a responsibility to nurture people and bring them to be part of our organizations and communities, but we also want great talent, right? You know, as you grow in your business, you're going to want to bring in the right talent at the right time. What is that looking like? You know, what kind of people are you, you know, wanting to be part of your ecosystem now, right? And what would you like? How is that going to change over the next growth cycles?
I think for me, and I just go back to sort of my personal sort of lived experiences, and having the good fortune of meeting some amazing people on my career and helping others with their careers. I think one of the things that's really excited me are people that have got bright minds and that are inquisitive. People that question and people that push you to make you think about things in a different way are worth their weight in gold. It comes through having people from diverse backgrounds. It comes from people with, you know, all sorts of advantages and disadvantages in life, where people have had knocks and scrapes and learnt things. You get so much from having that diversity in the workplace. We've got it now, right? We've got people that have studied equestrian studies. We've got people that are physicists. I mean, what an eclectic mix, you know, and there's 10 of us. That I think being a good communicator, being able to talk about the things that you care about passionately in a way that is not just about broadcasting, but you're open, you're listening, you're seeking to understand, you're inquisitive. All these things are things that you don't necessarily get taught at universities or colleges.
The apprenticeship route is, I think, one area of the world that is amazing. You know, I did an apprenticeship program, and I think if it wasn't for that, there's no way I would have known what I knew. But by the time I was able to actually try and make a difference in companies I worked at, you know, that apprenticeship route is amazing. You get tough love, you get the ability to make mistakes, And by the way, mistakes isn't a negative thing. A mistake is something you learn from, so you have to make them. And it's not until you actually grow up and look back, you realize you didn't really know anything. And you were, winging it. And, that thing where people say, have you got imposter syndrome? Well, if you don't, you're not pushing hard enough.
And I think the thing that we've had in our careers is a bit of resilience.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to pick yourself up and keep going.
It forms resilience. And I think, so the team that we've got now is amazing. In fact, we can do what we do without them. So they're incredible people. And
we're very lucky.
They're young people that really are passionate about wanting to make a difference. And I think that is what we're seeing out of university. I think we're seeing I think universities are driving the ability to choose what you do and not just sitting there and just accepting to take what's on offer. And I think that is really powerful. I mean, we've got someone working for us now who's just going through that exact thing. We've got something on offer for them, but they're taking it away to think about it. And that's really powerful. I just took what I was given,
and you're right. And, when I speak to, my daughter or anyone young like that, if you talk to them about engineering, right, it's a very different image that they suddenly get in their mind.
Right.
But you talk to them about contributing to sustainability, being part of a greener world, all that sort of stuff. Suddenly it's so much more important.
That's right.
Right. And I think that the narrative that actually some of most of the solutions that come out of that actually come from a innovation ecosystem,
right.
Engineering environment.
Absolutely right.
Is a connection that is still being made in young people's mind. And as you know, people make choices very early on, right? Yeah. And then try and see that through. But choice is such an important thing you said there.
But recognizing that you have one.
Yes.
You don't have to be on this path, right? At any point, going back to the walk with my father, at any point you can stop and you can just kind of reflect and go, you know what? Is this really right for me? Is this the thing I really want to be doing? Is this the stuff I want to be doing for the next 4 years? Because 4 years, like when you're 18 years old, will fly by. It will just disappear. And then you'll think, okay, now what do I do? Have I made a conscious decision about the things that I'm doing, or am I just going through a corporate world? Am I just going through a role that...
It's funny, isn't it? Because I'm a Coventry University alumni. So I went to Cov Uni, and when I got there, I thought I was entering into a program to do a degree, and it was nighttime because I already had children when I decided to get into university. And for me, that night course soon moved from being a degree course into a master's course, into extra bits that I could do. And, I managed to learn so much. Similar to you, I was terrible at school. I was the worst student. In fact, I never even went most of the time. My mum left work early. I used that as an advantage to stay in bed. So I was, the worst student ever. But I did manage to have a relationship with all of my teachers where they really supported me. And I think actually that relationship piece, if you learn that whilst you're at school, that's the best thing to learn. To how to talk to an adult. To be an adult.
Such a key message, because that relates to myself quite significantly. I grew up in East London and I was out of mainstream education by the time I was 15. I was working in Beckton, doing whatever. Yeah. And it was my relationship with a teacher that happened around probably age of 17. I walked into Barking College, right, that changed the trajectory of my outcome. Yeah. And I think that that's such an important thing, because you don't get taught that necessarily.
No, you
in
don't.
fact, I say this to my children quite often, that you actually get taught to almost obey.
Yeah, you
right?
do actually. Yeah.
You get taught, right, I'm here talking. When I'm talking, you don't talk, right? And the questions that you ask, yes, on the surface, teachers tend to say, right, ask as many questions as you want, but really that you're disrupting their flow, right? And there are great teachers out there. And I had one of them, like I said, at the age of 17, that was able to give me a conversation like an adult speaking to an adult.
Yeah, realistic conversation.
An A to A conversation rather than a parent to child sort of scenario. Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing that you said there.
It is. I think, you know what, through your journey, you end up with these few people, and it's never normally more than a few, that really help you for no gain of their own at all. None at all. So I similar to you, I had a college lecturer that became a fellow student on my degree course. And without that person, I wouldn't have got up Saturday mornings and went to the library, but because I knew I was meeting that person, I didn't want to let them down. And actually, that feeling of not wanting to let them down made me do it. And, there were a couple of other people along the journey that became mentors that they didn't need to do that. It's like they were giving back.
And this is where we are now, right? Because we have got the opportunity. We're very fortunate to have the opportunity to try and do that with others.
What's next for you, right? So look, we've talked about your journey up until now.
Sure.
We've talked about some of the talent, some of the messages we want to put out there to businesses and people to be part of this new ecosystem.
Yeah.
But there is a couple of things that I think weirdly sit with you in terms of responsibility, right? because you're new, because you're first entrants, almost first movers. There's other businesses, right, that may not have your background, but very much want to build a value stream that's, part of this ecosystem.
There are some great companies.
Yeah.
And I guess the first question really would be, what advice would you give them?
So collaborate is number one. I mean, actually, the one thing that Innovate UK and those and grants give you, if you take money and you don't need it, and you're actually just taking it to keep your business alive, that's the wrong thing to do. The reason for taking Innovate money is to actually innovate something and collaborate with companies you would never normally be able to be a part of. So that's the first thing. So if you're not a part of the Innovate landscape, get involved and understand it. Because there are real opportunities there of making long-term business partnerships with companies that you'd never normally get in part with.
And you've mentioned it. You've Innovate UK. We've got Drive 35.
Yeah.
I know that you've put recent applications in, and they've supported you with that. And I guess maybe not everybody's aware of that stuff, right?
Yeah,
not everybody
right.
knows.
Yeah. So go and find it. No disrespect.
Yeah.
If you want to move into this space, we absolutely welcome it, because we're all trying to solve the same issues, and we're all trying to do the same things, and collectively we'll be able to do a better job. Competition keeps you moving, and it is a good thing, but collaboration is even more powerful.
Yeah.
And when we get that right, we talked before about the voice that we have. We don't have much of a voice in this community that we are building, and the more we have, the louder our voice will become, and maybe we'll become more influential, and maybe we can start influencing policy and regulation and guidelines. But we absolutely can have an impact in the market, and that's what we must do.
Yeah, I think you said what's next for us. So what are we building? We've got a really robust strategy that's backed by UK investment, and that's really important to me, because I will use the word frustrated about how we've seen industry through our career lose its intellectual property and then lose its ability to employ and create jobs in the UK, although taxpayers' money has been used to develop that. So, if you're invested in by non-UK companies or organisations or investment firms and VCs, that IP that you're creating in the UK doesn't belong to you. And I'm really passionate that what we do at GreenTech Industries, the strategy that we're building, is to build a UK PLC that supports UK jobs and UK intellectual property that starts here. We will have to go global, and we have a plan to have a facility in Germany and the US, and our investment structure is set against that. But it will be based off a license agreement from the mothership of the UK. That license agreement will allow those places to operate, but the money that's used to be able to build the UK will be building a UK job portfolio and a UK intellectual property portfolio.
That's amazing. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to be doing now, right? We do want to support our UK ecosystem. Yes, we know, we can appreciate that there's going to be lots of interest. You only have to have one foot in another country to be able to become international. And I think that the growth is so important, because then we've got the talent ecosystem that we're supporting, the people that we support into our organizations, and having that whole growth is so important. And, I guess then there are lots of things that we can unpack here, right? About lots of things. I think maybe we'll come back for another opportunity to do that. But final thoughts for yourselves around, the messages that you would like to put out there, right, with regards to your growth and actually, as you mentioned, building a bigger community around this,
Yeah.
right? What would you say? What was the key messages that you want to put out there?
Seek to understand. Jump into the unknown because you've got an opportunity to shape it. Be part of something that creates a societal benefit. Go to work because you have a purpose and you want to be part of something. That's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create a company that people actually want to join, not a team that people want to leave.
Mm. And I think one last point, we've spoken about it twice really. We use the word sustainability, but for me, it's just all about resilience. So we talked about people resilience, but we also need to talk about supply chain resilience. And I think my key message is right now is that if we don't have a GreenTech Industries in the market, then we lose the resilience of this whole supply chain because we don't have the ability to manage repair, service, aftermarket, parts availability, and to be able to keep the cost of cars at a point that can go into the resale market for second life. So my key message really is that we need to make sure that whatever we're doing in industry has got one eye on making sure that we've got valuable material to be able to do the job that we're trying to deliver. And because without it, we haven't got resilience of a supply chain.
That's fantastic and very important messages. And can I just say that, from my perspective, and we've talked off camera a few times, and I think the work you're doing is absolutely amazing.
Thanks.
And
Thank you.
The things that you've highlighted to me, I've talked about, even with you not there,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Because
that's
they've
good.
resonated with
Thank
me.
you.
And and if we can support that in this conversation or with many other conversations, you definitely have our back in terms of
thank
what
you.
we can support.
We'd
Yeah, well,
love
thank
to
you.
come
Right.
back
Thank you.
anytime.
And I look forward to see where this goes, and we will come back, I'm sure, and have other conversations like this. And I guess the key message from me is that engage,
Absolutely.
with this, and talk to yourselves and people out there who are looking for new opportunities, because you've got some great entrepreneurial spirits here, great experiences, amazing technical backgrounds, and well done is all I can really
Well,
say. And
look,
Thank
look
you.
forward to keep supporting.
Thank you very
we
much.
pay that compliment back straight away because without people who want to give people a platform, there is no way of having a voice that's actually not tied into big corporate. So thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me on this electrifying episode of Switching On Electrified Skills podcast. Together, we'll shape a future that is powered by electricity. If you would like to learn more about electrification and explore courses and jobs, please visit ershub.co.uk or connect with us via social media channels. Thank you once again for joining me today. Until next time, keep charging ahead and unleash the full potential of your electrifying skills.